It's wonderful to see you here. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today I'm going to tell you an adventure-filled story. The hero of this story traveled thousands of kilometers from home. He lived for years in lands he had never known. When he returned home, no one believed what he told them. His name was Marco Polo. Grab your tea or coffee. Find a comfortable place to sit. Let's begin. Marco Polo was born in 1254 in the city of Venice, Italy. At that time, Venice was one of the most important trade centers in Europe. Ships setting sail to sea, goods brought from distant lands, people speaking different languages. Venice was that kind of city. Marco's father, Niccolo Polo, and his uncle Maffeo Polo were merchants. They made their living through trade. They were not ordinary merchants. They were brave men who traveled to distant countries and did business in foreign lands. When Marco was a young child, his father and uncle set out on a long journey to Asia. They could not return for years. Marco also lost his mother during that journey. He grew up without a father or a mother. When his father and uncle returned, Marco was 15 years old. The stories they told captured Marco's interest. Distant lands, magnificent cities, cultures he had never seen. These stories fed the imagination of young Marco. In 1271, Marco was only 17 years old. He made the decision to embark on a great journey together with his father and uncle. Their destination was China. Going to China at that time was not like boarding a plane today and traveling for a few hours. It was a journey that lasted years, was full of dangers, and was extremely demanding. They departed from Venice. First they crossed the Mediterranean. Then they made their way through the lands of Anatolia. From there they crossed into Iran. And then the Silk Road began. The Silk Road was not actually a single road. It was a trade route connecting Asia and Europe. Valuable goods such as silk, spices, glass, and gold were carried along these routes. Traveling these roads was extremely difficult. Marco and his family encountered every kind of geography on this journey. There were scorching deserts, freezing cold at night, and unbearable heat during the day. There were high mountains where even breathing became difficult, dangerous passes, desolate areas, exhausting trails. There was also the matter of illness. Marco fell sick during the journey. They were forced to rest in one region for months. One had to be prepared because anything could happen at any moment. They also encountered different cultures. In every city, a different language, a different tradition, a different food. Marco observed all of these carefully. He was a curious person. He imprinted what he saw onto his mind. The journey continued for approximately 3.5 years. In 1275, they finally reached China. They were heading to the court of one of the most powerful rulers of that era, Kublai Khan. Have you heard this name? He was the ruler of the Mongol Empire. At that time, this empire was the largest land empire the world had ever seen. It encompassed much of present-day China, Mongolia, and a great deal more. Kublai Khan was a powerful but also a curious ruler. He was interested in foreign cultures, different religions, and people coming from distant lands. Marco's father and uncle had previously visited this man's court and had made a good impression. For this reason, when Marco and his family arrived at the court, they were received very warmly. Kublai Khan saw Marco and was impressed. He was a young, intelligent, curious, and observant young man. He learned languages quickly. He examined everything around him carefully. These were qualities that Kublai Khan valued. After some time, Marco entered the service of Kublai Khan. This situation was both an opportunity and something highly unusual. A young European was working in the court of the Mongol Empire. Such a thing was extremely rare in that era. Kublai Khan gave Marco various assignments. He carried important messages from one place to another. He was sent to different cities and different regions. Thanks to these assignments, Marco saw, came to know, and understood many different corners of the empire. The years spent at court were like a great school for Marco. Every day he learned something new. He closely observed both Chinese culture and the Mongol understanding of governance. Over time, Kublai Khan's respect for Marco grew. Marco Polo stayed in China for approximately 17 years. That is a very long time. When he had arrived here, he was a 17-year-old boy. Now he had reached the age of 34. So what did he see and experience during this time? First of all, the cities left him astonished. At that time, the great cities of Europe were quite small and modest compared to today. But China was different. Marco saw many large cities. Millions of people lived in these cities. The streets were orderly. The markets were large. Everything operated in an organized manner. Marco could not hide his astonishment at the size of these cities. Venice was also a large city in that era. But compared to the cities of China, it was small. He also learned much about trade. China at that time had a far more developed trade network than Europe. The markets were large, the goods were diverse, and the commerce system functioned well. But what surprised Marco most was technology. At that time, Europe had yet to know certain things that China had been using for years. For example, paper money. In Europe, people used gold or silver coins when shopping. Heavy, impractical. But in China, there was paper money. Light, easy to carry. When Marco first saw this, he could not believe it. Can goods be purchased with a piece of paper? He thought. Yes, they could. Coal also caught Marco's attention. In China, people burned black stones to heat their homes and bathwater. Marco had never seen these before. These black stones burned very well and gave off heat for a long time. The use of coal in Europe was not that widespread at that time. The postal system was also astonishing. Through this system established by Kublai Khan, messages were delivered very quickly from one end of the empire to the other. Mounted postal workers waited ready at set intervals. When a message arrived, the horse was changed, the worker was changed, and the journey continued without interruption. Marco was filled with admiration for this system. Throughout these years, Marco did not merely observe. He learned languages, spoke with people, and traveled to different regions. Thanks to the assignments given by Kublai Khan, he made journeys extending both south and north and west. Everywhere he went, he saw something different. By the end of these 17 years, Marco had learned countless things about China that Europeans did not know. Years passed. Marco and his family felt the longing for Venice more and more strongly. They now wanted to return. But Kublai Khan was reluctant to let them go easily. He valued them and particularly trusted the Polo family. Finally, an opportunity arose. Kublai Khan needed trustworthy people to escort a princess by sea to Iran. Marco and his family took on this mission. Thus, an official reason to depart from China came about. In 1292, the sea voyage began. This time it was not the overland route, but the sea route. They left China, traveled along the coasts of Southeast Asia, crossed the Indian Ocean and reached Iran. From there they continued westward by land. This journey was not easy either. It took a long time. During the voyage, some crew members lost their lives to illness. The hardships did not end. But finally, in 1295, they returned to Venice, after approximately 24 years. When Marco had left home, he was a 17-year-old young man. When he returned, he was a 41-year-old man. When they returned, the city did not even recognize them. After so many years, no one remembered who these men coming from distant lands were. Even their own family had difficulty believing them. Their clothing and appearance had changed. This family had brought many valuable goods from the East, but the most valuable thing they brought was neither gold nor precious stones. The most valuable thing they brought was knowledge. Knowledge accumulated, observed, and lived over years. Shortly after his return to Venice, something unexpected happened in Marco Polo's life. A naval battle broke out between Venice and Genoa, and Marco took part in this battle. Genoa won, and Marco was taken prisoner. He ended up in prison. This was the most difficult period of his life, but it also coincided with a period that was very significant from a historical perspective. In prison, Marco shared a cell with a writer named Rustichello da Pisa. Rustichello was a skilled storyteller. Marco, on the other hand, was a man with a great deal to tell. The two decided to work together. Marco spoke at length. The journey he had undertaken with his father and uncle, the adventures along the Silk Road, Kublai Khan's court, the great cities of China, paper money, coal, the postal system, what he had seen, heard, and experienced. And Rustichello wrote it all down. From this collaboration emerged the book titled The Travels of Marco Polo. The book attracted great interest in Europe. As people read these stories, they were both astonished and excited, because at that time Europe knew very little about Asia. Marco Polo cast a light upon this unknown. Most people who read it did not believe what was described. Many thought the stories were exaggerated or completely made up. Cities that large cannot exist, they said. Buying things with paper. Nonsense, they said. This man is lying, they said. Marco's own words were these: I have not told half of what I saw. Marco Polo passed away in 1324, around the age of 70, in Venice. After his death, his book continued to be read across Europe. Over time, it became one of the most popular books in the world. One of the book's greatest influences was on Christopher Columbus. Columbus had read Marco Polo's book. When Columbus sought to reach Asia by sea, he had in mind the wealthy cities Marco Polo had described. When he set sail westward in 1492, he was in fact trying to find the Asia that Marco Polo had described. He arrived in America, but behind that journey lay the influence of Marco Polo's book, not just Columbus. Many explorers of the Age of Discovery drew inspiration from Marco Polo's work. The sailors, explorers, and merchants of that era read this book. Marco Polo's influence was immense in the steps taken toward the unknown. The geographical discoveries happened under his pioneering spirit. Marco Polo's legacy goes even beyond this. He was like a bridge connecting the cultures of East and West. He did not merely observe the places he visited. He understood them and told their story. Today, Marco Polo's name lives on in many places. A species of shark has been named after him. There is a species of sheep called the Marco Polo sheep, living in Central Asia and passing through the very routes Marco traveled. The airport in Venice is also named Marco Polo Airport. Marco Polo's story ends here, but the paths he opened, the pages he wrote, and the mark he left continued for centuries. In the coming period, we will be publishing videos about the history of the Silk Road, Kublai Khan and the Mongol Empire, the Age of Discovery, and Christopher Columbus. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss them. I hope that one day Marco Polo's story becomes a source of inspiration for all of us.